Okay, welcome everyone to Social Forensication. This is a multidisciplinary social engineering attack that actually involves a lot more than social engineering. Before we get started, everybody having a good time so far? I'm totally glad that I braved the 11 and a half hours of flying in the snow. It's definitely been worthwhile so far. So to get started, about me, I'm a senior OSINT analyst at Complex. I'm the 2017 DerbyCon Social Engineering Capture the Flag winner. I've competed in quite a few OSINT CTFs as well, placing between second and fourth typically. I failed to capture the gold so far. Next week I'm actually competing in a social engineering capture the flag at Hackfest in Quebec, as well as the TraceLab Missing Person CTF. I'm writing a book with no starch about social engineering, and I also offer online training via the OSINT. So about that, just standard disclaimer, the thoughts and opinions are mine and not my employer, past, present, or future. There's a picture of the black badge. I don't take it out of the house, but I'm pretty proud of it. And one of my mentees got a DEF CON black badge this year. He was giving me a hard time. Well, at least my black badge is for a conference that's not defunct. It's like, well, this one's good for 14 conferences now, so eat that. I got mine solo. He was on a team of 5. So I give him a hard time for that. Anyway, so basically for this presentation, I want to talk about the basics of social engineering. We're not going to get into the underlying psychology of it too deep. We'll have like one quick slide to talk about that. And then we'll talk a little bit about what's already out there in terms of social engineering using USB devices. And then we're going to talk about weaponizing memory forensics. And it's really, weaponizing may not even be the correct term. It's just using it for something besides post-mortem analysis. But we'll talk about like my preconceived notions, context and scenarios, execution and mitigations. So social engineering, very simply, it's human hacking. You're trying to influence, if you're doing it from an ethical perspective at least, you're trying to influence to do something that's not necessarily in their best interest. You're trying to get them to click a link, open a file, or on the other side of it, the provide information. Salespeople do this all the time. Oh, you're not the right person to talk to about selling this advanced, persistent, next generation whiz-bang solution. Could you tell me who is? It's social engineering. Salespeople, social engineering is basically sales. The difference is what you're trying to sell is getting them to click something or do something that's not in their best interest. Arguably a lot of salespeople are the same way, but we'll leave that for a different day. So when we talk about the types of social engineering, we think about phishing and vishing. That's probably your most common. Like the SECTF is very vishing based. There's no phishing allowed. There's no dumpster diving or baiting allowed. Literally, you do your OSINT, you submit your report, and then at the date and time you're told, you show up, you get in the booth, and you make the phone calls. But for this one, we're actually going to look at a little bit more the physical side of things, but we're not necessarily looking at stuff like what Brent's talking about on track 1 right now, or stuff that DeviantAlem deals with in terms of subverting locks and access control systems. I'm going to take what I call more of the Jenny Radcliffe approach, and that's just gain access via being a pleasant person, making someone want to work with you, and convincing them that you have their best interests in mind. So another question I get about social engineering is, how do I get started in social engineering? Well, I fell into social engineering via happenstance. I was working on a doctorate that I didn't finish, or I haven't finished yet, and they said, identify a problem. It was 2016, ransomware was all the rage, and I was like, I'm not so savvy with like malware analysis, so I probably don't want to do a doctoral dissertation on this. And they were like, oh, well, don't try to boil the ocean. Try to find a pebble of sand in the ocean and focus on that. So I was like, what's the underlying cause of ransomware? And at the time, it was phishing. And then I was like, well, if I dial this back a little bit further past phishing, and I cover social engineering at a broad stroke, anyone who's worked in the formal academic space knows that you've got to have a certain percentage of peer-reviewed documents. There wasn't a whole lot of peer-reviewed documents in the IT journals. So I figured out that if I added social engineering, I could open up psychology and sociology journals. I still have I call it the binder of doom. It's a 3-inch binder that's bulging. It's really about 4 inches now, full of peer-reviewed academic documents on the topic. And when I started researching it, I fell in love. So over the course of that time, I've kind of broke it back to this is what we're looking for. So to do social engineering, if you're doing anything physical or vishing, you need some improv skills. Nothing's ever going to go as you planned, 100%. Something will go wrong, and to be a good social engineer, you need to be able to tap dance, basically. I always think back to this cartoon I saw as a kid. I'm from Tennessee, so I'm not being offensive when I say this, but these rednecks had abducted Betty Boop, and they were trying to get her to dance, and she said no. So they started shooting guns at her feet to make her dance. That's how social engineering is quite often. When you're on the phone with someone, they're going to ask you questions. They're going to try to hang you up on something. It's all about the litmus checks. Think about how you handle scammers when you accidentally answer when a scammer calls you. The weird questions you might ask. Like when someone calls me from Dell, I'm like, oh, are you still headquartered in Montana? Oh, yes, absolutely. Okay, seems legit. Or when the IRS calls me from Spokane, Washington. That's a fun one. Oh, when did they move the country's capital from DC to Spokane? Oh, well, it's all Washington. Okay. Duly noted. But anyway, you've got that. And then if you're going to be in person, you need to be the character you say you are. I've got all these fake badges here, and I've been known to be Donnie Butts, because this one says I'm Donnie Butts, the state password inspector. The state seal on it is South Carolina, but everywhere I go, if I use it, I just convince them somehow that I'm on loan from South Carolina to insert state here, and I still get the questions every time. Can you provide me an example of a previous or current password that you use? Psychologically, because I ended the sentence with current password that you use, typically they give you their current password. And I followed that with, what was your mom's name before she was married? I don't mention maiden name, so the guards typically don't go up. But anyway, it's there. And all of it really boils down to the psychology, and we're going to discuss the principles of psychology that applies to this on the next slide. Of course, InfoSec plays into it because you've got to look at the offense and the defense. So look at how you're going to weasel your way in, and then also look at how organizations are going to attempt to defend against it. For example, if you're trying to spoof, and you're trying to spoof a large organization, there's a chance they have SPF, DKIM, or DMARC. Spoofing's not going to work for you. You need to squat. If they're using Proofpoint or Mimecast, that's going to create complexity. You're going to have to find a way around that. Certain words that you're going to need to use. And then, of course, the heuristic analysis of how long has this domain existed? Is this on any reputation list? The whole blue team side of it. But then also, depending on what you're trying to do with your social engineering, how are you going to do this? Are you going to attempt to give them a macro-enabled Word doc? Are you going to plug in a rubber ducky? Are you going to just create a website and capture their information? Whatever, how are you going to do it? And then, as much as we hate to say it, technical writing is an integral part of InfoSec, because at the end of the day, I don't care if you're red team or blue team, you're going to do the work and you're going to produce a hopefully coherent report that in a perfect world, someone's going to read. From my time as a consultant a few jobs ago, doing assessments against companies, apparently they don't read them because they don't enact the recommendations. So in theory, they should read it. Anyway, so the psychology perspective. This is from Dr. Robert Cialdini's book, Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion. These 6 principles can dictate how to influence pretty much anybody for anything. You may consider it manipulating the incentives. I'm hesitant to use the word manipulation or manipulate because from the perspective of the American Psychological Association, manipulation is basically the same thing as influence with an element of malice added to it. So while you're being kind of sinister, at the end of the day, you do have their best interest in mind. So I stop at the influence portion. Obviously, some of the less ethical entities, spoken criminals, they'll manipulate all day because they don't have your best interest in mind. But anyway, we can always think about these things from the perspective of like a car salesperson. So you pay $500 more for this car and I will take you to a steak dinner. I seriously had a car salesperson try to get me with that. They're like, you're going to finance it, so it's only going to make your payment go up like $3 a month. Okay, so I saw they just opened a new Morton Steakhouse. How do you feel about that? Oh no, that's not what I was thinking. Well, there's Ruth's Chris. No, not that either. Fleming's? No. Golden Corral? That's more my speed. Yeah, no, get out of here with that nonsense. I'm not paying you $500 more for you to take and get me a $2 steak. And it always makes me think of, like, I'm a closet pro wrestling fan. It always makes me think of Jim Ross when he's talking about somebody who's like, oh, that person's tougher than a $2 steak. It's like, yeah, that's what this car salesperson was trying to get me to pay $500 for. Commitment and consistency. We don't see that in the car sales world. That's more in the IT sales world, like the vendors. You've consistently bought from me, so I will consistently sell to you with your best interests in mind. When a salesperson leaves one company and goes to another, it's not uncommon for them to take their Rolodex and start blowing up your email there. It's commitment and consistency. Social proof. You go to a car dealership to look at a Ford Focus and they try to put you in a Z4 Roadster. I really wasn't looking for a Focus, I was looking for a Volkswagen. And backstory is I had just flipped my RX-8 a few days prior. And I told them, I was like, this is what I'm looking for, this is what I'm gonna do. These are the terms, I'm gonna come, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, I'm out the door. They tried to push me in the Z4, and I just pulled out my phone and I had pictures of my RX-8 that was crushed on top. I mean, I walked away, so that was cool. I was like, I'm not doing a convertible or a glass top car, get out of here. They're like, but successful men your age drive those. I'm like, I don't care what successful men my age do because I am a total screw up. He didn't know how to respond to that. I'm skipping, or actually, show of hands. Who here has met a salesperson that didn't at least attempt, key operator there, attempt to appear likable? There's plenty of them that are not likable. We can probably all unanimously agree on that, but they at least attempt to be likable. People like doing business with likable people. Urgency, scarcity. That's the last one. I'm skipping authority on purpose. Car salespeople very easily. Oh, you know, there was a guy that came in here. He really liked that car. He went down the road to the bank. If you can get financed before him, it's yours. You remember that dealership about the Z4? They tried that with me too. You know what the problem was? It was Sunday. It's like, pop-bo. And then authority, this is the final nail in the coffin for that dealership. If you see me around the Atlanta metro area, if you ever see my hand go out a window and let someone know they're number one, chances are you're driving by the right dealership. I finally got them to talk about the Volkswagen. They come out, they give me the price. They're trying to get me to sign that offer thing. They claim it's legally binding. I'm yet to see that hold up in court. But anyway, I was like, okay, why is this not itemized? This price is like $5,000 more than your online price. They're like, we don't itemize. I'm like, well, if you want to make this sale today, you're going to itemize. Okay. Well, let me talk to my manager and see. It's like, okay, cool. I was like, I'm a hacker, so I'm just going to do some research while you're doing this. Whip out a computer, go watch stupid cat videos. I'm actually not even doing anything. Had a wireless keyboard. It wasn't even plugged in, but I was just clanking away to make them think I was doing something that might affect their system. That puts a sense of urgency on them, by the way. If you want to do something, buying a car, go over to Johnny's booth and buy a Hackers for Charity shirt. You get a sticker as well, put it on your computer, just roll in with it, and then when they go to start wasting your time to wear you down, just whip it out and, like, if nothing else, just put a matrix screen up, you'll be fine. But anyway, when the itemized list came out, there was Gap on it, I was like, okay, that's cool. And then there was a warranty on it. I was like, I don't want this warranty. They're like, but it's a certified pre-owned warranty. I'm like, you're a Ford dealership selling a Volkswagen. You cannot certify this. They're like, well, that's what it is. I was like, I don't want it. State law mandates that you have to have this warranty. Okay, I've never bought a car in Georgia before. Georgia has some weird laws. I mean, we can probably agree on that. They try to make security research illegal, right? You can thank your good friends at Equifax for that, by the way. But anyway, I was like, I've never heard of this. What's the statute number or the name of the law? I'll look it up. If it's legit, cool. If not, then I'm out of here. They're like, oh, that law's not published. I walked into their customer waiting area. They had like this mini fridge full of like sodas. I grab as many sodas as I can carry in my hands. I walk out, and with my other hand, I give them the one finger salute, or the California howdy, if you will. And I've never been back since. I may or may not have went on a rampage of creating fake accounts tied to Proton Mail across various VPN nodes to give them some bad reviews. Really bad reviews. Supposedly the toilets in there have communicable diseases. Anyway, so getting into the actual attack side, I'm sure most of the people in this room know who this is, right? Jason Street. He's known for drinking copious amounts of, I believe, Diet Pepsi and occasionally breaking into the wrong bank, mostly because he's drank so much Pepsi that he has to pee. But he's also known to plug in things like rubber duckies, just for the purpose of plugging it in to see if it works. So, I mean, that's there, it works, but what are you going to do with it? How do you want to handle this? Later on, I'm going to make a South Park reference, so, I mean, you've got to have that end game associated with it. So, what I'm doing that's a little bit different, so what you need to pull this off, these are paid things that you would need. You could use an external hard drive or a thumb drive, either or. Make sure that whatever forensic company you're going to pose as, catch them at a conference and get one of their stickers to put on your external hard drive. And then talk to Skydog the next time you're at a con that he's at and have him make you a fake badge for that company. He probably has their template already. But anyway, that, or you could use a rubber ducky or a bash bunny. I like the rubber ducky a little bit better because it's a little bit more low-key. Granted, the bash bunny, you could put 2 payloads on it, but you're restricted in size. And if you're trying to steal a big file, you might not have room on the bash bunny. Free tools that you'll need. The only reason I say free/others, chances are you already have a computer you can use for this, so you don't have to go buy a new one for this. But if you want to use it as justification to buy a new one, by all means, feel free to do so. You can quote me on it, and whoever you buy from can send me the kickback whenever. I don't have any agreements with anybody. FTK, you can use FTK Imager Lite for this. You don't have to have the paid version. FTK Imager Lite is free. Volatility is also free. So let's look at the process here. So we're going to gain access. We're going to be, as sweet as honey, gain access, be very matter of fact. And then from there, we need to impersonate a forensics consultant. So choose whichever company you want to go with. I always choose Leg4Co, legitimate forensics company, because it's totally legit, right? That way I don't get in any legal trouble by saying I'm with like CrowdStrike or FireEye or whoever. I think they've probably got bigger legal teams than I do. But anyway, you do that, you build the rapport with whomever you're talking to, and you probably want to do some research in advance. I would not recommend anyone in purchasing, legal, IT, or anything that's going to use a boatload of RAM. So things like video editing, photo editing, developers, you might want to avoid those. You can get developers on all the other stuff, just find out their GitHub, and chances are they've got hard-coded creds anyway. But anyway, you build the rapport, and then you've got to convince the victim that you have a valid need to collect the information. The scenario I like to use is, I'm a forensic consultant with legitimate forensics company. We've been hired to do analysis on your organization because there was a system compromised within your network. It wasn't yours, you didn't do anything wrong, so you're keeping the whole fear factor away. But through other forensic analysis, we saw that it communicated with your system. So just as a precautionary measure, I've been sent to collect an image of your system for analysis to make sure it's not infected. You've done nothing wrong, it'll be a very quick process. At that point, they're probably like, okay, here's the key though. You want to keep them sitting there and talking, because you don't want them going to the water cooler and be like, hey, did you see that forensics team? Have they came and saw you yet? You don't want that, because the person they may say that to is the person who may be the person that would actually sign that contract. Keep them at their desk talking. And then from there, you get the image, and then you scoot out the door. So with this, you can load the image in your favorite Linux flavor, or if you want to be lazy, I like lazy, I call it efficient. It's really efficiency over laziness. But Volatility is native to both SIFT and Kali. Here's the caveat though. In Kali, you don't have quite as many modules as you do in SIFT. Some of the modules that I'm going to talk about, you don't have in Kali. So you actually have to go to the Volatility Foundation's GitHub under Community and download them from there. And then you have to actually play with your syntax of actually executing the command. It's really easy, but that's just something to consider. you're going to have all the time in the world to do this because you're not sitting on their site anymore. You've got the image in your evil lair in your mom's basement. You've got a copious amount of Mountain Dew, Hot Pockets, and Cheetos. You're good. Just make sure you have your hoodie on. Volatility is 10 times faster if you're wearing a black hoodie. You get a double speed if you're listening to like nerdcore or like some trance. Just saying. But anyway, you use those volatility modules, and then the end game is pwnage. And here comes the South Park reference. I mean, we have to know the end game. We don't want to be like the underpants gnomes. The underpants gnomes were all about step 1, collect the underpants. Step 2, step 3, profit. So step 1, collect the memory image. Step 2, step 3, pwnage, right? So we need to know that step 2, and that step 2 is going to be what we do with the actual volatility modules. And in some cases, volatility might not be the right answer, and I'll explain that in a moment. But anyway, with this, to gain the access, get some business cards. Vistaprint don't care who you work for as long as you pay them. Quick ID card don't care who you work for as long as you pay them. You can go on Instagram and find pictures of their badges. If you come to my OSINT workshop later today, we're going to be having a lot of fun. Like Sheldon Cooper has his show Fun with Flags. Mine's Fun with Badges. Because you're hard pressed to go to a company Instagram, like the geographic part of Instagram, and not see a badge. It's a joke, but it's also true. If you have a clipboard, people take you more seriously. A forensic consultant would not be seen walking around with a ladder or a toolbox, but those also help you gain access as well. Have a briefcase or a backpack, and then make sure you have a solid pretext. Rehearse it. Get a group of people to grill you on it and try to get you to stumble on it, because you've got to be like lightning quick on this. The second you pause for more than half a second, it's over, because they're going to see right through it. You probably don't want to roll in dressed like this, just saying. I mean, I've seen a few forensic consultants that dress this way, but I just wouldn't do it. So anyway, so the hurdles. DLP software is a real thing, right? So if you plug in a thumb drive, if they've got DLP software, it's probably not going to let you execute. If you're using a rubber ducky, there's a good chance you can bypass this. So you could use a ducky either way, but USB device if they are not using DLP. And here's the hang up. If you're going to collect the memory image, the user that you're targeting needs to have administrative rights. So that's contradictory to what I said earlier about don't target IT. What you're trying to target is someone who has more access than they should. If you can't come across that, I've got a backup plan for you, and that's use Procdump. If you use Procdump, it does not require administrative credentials. I tested it last night, and time permitting, I'll demonstrate parts of it today. But you get your images, whether it be the image of the memory or the dump, and then you walk out the door. If you're using the ducky, if you're going to store to the ducky, you're going to have to flash the firmware with a thing called Twin Ducky. And then you're going to have to write some stuff in ducky code. I'll show you a website towards the end that can help you generate it. They have some preloaded stuff you could use as well. There's a Python library for it as well. But anyway, so for actually doing this, you need to collect some OSINT. And then with that, you need to know like how the people are, who's most likely to fall victim to your shenanigans. Of course, you need to know the operating system, because, I mean, if they have a Mac, number one, Mimikatz is not going to work against a Mac. So there's that. And then also from the other perspective, if they're using a Mac and it's a MacBook Pro like 2018 or 2019, I don't know if they did it in 2017, but you're going to have dongles. Since I bought this MacBook Pro, all it has is 4 USB-C connections. I perpetually walk around with 2 bags full of dongles. Hey, it's the price you pay for the horsepower. I had to get off Windows because last year at B-Sides Orlando, 3 slides into giving a talk that I'd never given before, I had a blue screen of death. And I was like, yep, I'm going to Mac. Nope, I'm done. But anyway, you can also find out via OSINT whether they're using DLP in some cases. Their logo may be on a DLP provider's website. You may be able to find things on Indeed.com about people administrating the DLP software, various types of things there. Same thing with the antivirus. If you're going to do something to actually execute anything further than collecting a memory image, or if you're going to attempt privilege escalation, you might want to know what antivirus they're using so you can actually test it and make sure that whatever script you're using is not going to get flagged. The user rights, of course, you want someone with local admin or domain admin, but if not, there's a way around that. And then use the culture. Is InfoSec embraced, or is it considered a burden? And then, of course, time to collect. Time to collect is important because, I mean, depending on the amount of memory the system has, it's going to take time. So I did a benchmark against a system with 2 gigs of memory and a system with 12 gigs of memory, both DDR4. The times are at the very bottom. So basically 4.5 minutes for 2 gigs and right at 26 minutes for 12 gigs. But anyway, you also have to factor in the configuration and vulnerability management perspective. If they have very strong configuration and vulnerability management, you're going to go with Procdump. You're not going to be, unless that user has admin, you're not going to escalate to it within the time frame you're looking for, because this is not something that, unlike some red team engagements that go on for weeks, this is you're in and right out the door. You're trying to get out as quickly as possible. So you don't want to be trying to find, get the sys info so that you can run it against Windows Exploit Suggester or something like that to find a way in. And then from there, of course, you would have to go to like Exploit DB, search exploit, find out whatever they've got so that you could go. So with Procdump, if you can't get past the UAC, just dump a browser, because people obviously share or they reuse passwords. You can also find out other things from it, but I'm focusing only on the password perspective. You could dump other applications as well. If you wanted to try for something a little bit more complex, by all means do so. But in this case, to do 3 dumps 5 seconds apart, the syntax would be procdump -ma -s3 -n5, and then I would go with Firefox. So I've got some stuff that I can show you towards the end with that. So just go with that. It's something simple. You can see if they're reusing passwords. It's a very simple strings command with some grep associated with finding passwords, but sure. So with Volatility, about that, it is an open source memory forensics tool. As I stated, it is native to CIFT and Kali. You can set these variables to make your life a lot easier. Basically, it's just setting the location, and that's going to be the file you're analyzing, so you don't have to pass the -f every time. And then the profile, that way you don't have to specify -- profile equals whatever. So here are some modules that I've found to be rather useful. Mimikatz is probably #1 on the list, but here's the caveat. If it's a Windows 10 system, it's probably not going to work right now. It's always a constant game of cat and mouse. He always finds something that allows access, then Microsoft fixes it, then he finds another way and they fix it. It's just a matter of finding that period. But if you're going with like Windows 7 or earlier, easily. Image info, if you don't know which operating system they have, which if I were sitting at someone's desk collecting a memory image, I would be getting that supplemental data, but you might not be able to find out like the explicit service pack. You can use image info to do that. Depending on the age of the system, so if it's Vista or earlier, you have to use NetScan. And then there's also ConScan, they do the same thing. Internet Explorer history, Chrome and Firefox history. Internet Explorer history is built into Kali. Chrome and Firefox history, you have to actually go pull from their GitHub. But it's very easy. You can also find out what auto runs. So if you want to possibly do something a little bit more sinister later as part of your engagement, you can find out what auto runs and then find a way to weaponize that. Anything that was on their notepad, anything that was on their clipboard, you can even get screenshots. Services, you can see what's there. Anything passed in the command line, it's all right there for you. You can pull it directly out of memory. And here's the beautiful thing. After you've walked out the door with the image, there are 0 opportunities for detection. From a blue team perspective, the only opportunities for detection in this whole scenario for the memory side would be plugging in the device, executing FTK imager. So you're going to have the UAC, so there's going to be a 4672 for administrator, and then FTK imager stopping, and you pulling the thumb drive out and walking out the door. That's the only detection capabilities this has. If you go the Procdump route, it'll be the same thing. So It'll be plug in, Procdump, save the file, move the file, whatever you do with it, and then unplug. But you won't get that 4672 to cue the SOC in on it. So with this, the limitations associated with it, of course the operating system itself is a limitation. Because you're going to be able to find certain things in some operating systems you can't find in others, for one, and then for two, capabilities. If you go into an environment expecting Windows, so you walk in with FTK Imager and all of a sudden they have Linux desktops and Macs, you're kind of out of luck. So for Linux, there's a tool called Lime, and then for Mac, you can use Recall, which is part of Google Rapid Response. It's actually a fork of the original Volatility. They used to be very similar. They run almost the same. The syntax is slightly different. But obviously, there are far more plugins for this for Windows than you're going to have for Mac and Linux. So expect to get more data out of that. And then, of course, your time is going to be your limitation. If you can only sneak in for 15 minutes, don't target someone with 12 gigs of DDR4, which, I mean, 8 gigs is pretty standard, so that would be right at the threshold. You might be able to squeeze an extra couple of minutes out of it. But with that, we're kind of at the demo portion, so this is actually, this is ducktoolkit.com. I don't have internet connectivity. I didn't connect to the Wi-Fi in advance. But if you go to this website, here you have the payload generator, which has built-in payloads you can use. You can write your own and put it into inject.bin and then drop that on your rubber ducky, and that'll accomplish it. If you find a rubber ducky and you want to know what's on it, if you're brave enough to plug anything in, this would be a way to go with that as well. And then there's the Python library as well. You don't have to do it through the cloud. So something to consider. So right here, I've collected some stuff already. Within this, we've got, we can see there's some Firefox dumps here. And then we've got some hashes. I'll just go ahead and show you the hashes. Get the font a little bit bigger. Right there's some NTLM hashes. You can have all sorts of fun with that. Feel free to pass them about, if you will, if you want to pass some hashes. But there's actually mem dump right here is the actual memory dump. So we'll start with the Firefox.exe. I know exactly which one has what I'm looking for in it. So for this test, what I did is I created a bogus LinkedIn account. I've since deleted it because I'm giving you the password to it. And then from there, what I basically did was I stored the password in Firefox. So if they store passwords, it's there. So I'm being really lazy. I was up until like 3 in the morning doing this. So to make sure I have the right syntax, you can see there's a lot of trial and error here. I ran some hashcat against the hashes, John the Ripper, no bueno there. There's a bunch of volatility things. Oh, here we go. So the password I set for this was, this is a password. So what we're going to do is we're going to say minus B5 minus A5. So we're going to look at 5 lines before and 5 lines after. And we'll cut this more piece out. Because I was trying to find a way to do it without having to put this whole this is a password, because putting the word password in it, you're going to be parsing for a long time. But anyway, in doing so, strings, there it is. So here's the lines before. Joe Gray at theoscension.com, this is a password, linkedin.com. So another way you could actually parse against this, instead of parsing for is a password, you could parse for .com. And that right there is going to be a little bit off, mostly on the fact of I literally went to nothing but LinkedIn in this instance of Firefox. But it's there, and because you've got the 5 above and 5 below, that congested it a lot as well. But that's one way to go about it. With the modern versions of Firefox, it's there. We know that people are sharing or reusing passwords. People are saving them. This is all the more reason to use a password manager, because that further complicates things. If you're not saving it in your browser, you still have the capability of having that similar experience with the password manager, with the browser plugin, but it's not saved. So from a defensive perspective, that's certainly something to look at. Now let's take a look at the memdump.mem file. And admittedly, this is a Windows Vista image, so it's old, but I did it because it's a very small image. The larger the image, the more amount of time it's going to take to actually analyze it. And some of the smaller images I came across, they either didn't have the information that we were looking for because they didn't have enough users, or it was too new, so Mimikatz wasn't working or something like that. So just to start out, I'm doing this in Kali. So the syntax in Kali is you type out the full word volatility. In SIFT, it's vol.py. But anyway, we give it the file, so that's going to be memdump.mem, and we'll just do image info really quickly. So it's just going to run across, it's going to look at several things to do with like the kernel database, and look for, I guess, maybe metadata components, might be a way to put it, characteristics of how it actually is structured to determine which operating system it is. I'll give this another moment. If it doesn't work, then I'll just spill the beans that it's Vista Service Pack 1. Oh, there it is. Vista Service Pack 1 x86. So it's a 32-bit Windows Vista. With that, we don't need anything else from that, so I'm just going to go ahead and Control-C that. So let's look at NetScan. Oh, nope. I get those confused all the time. Oh. So we give it the profile that we got from image info, and now it will work. So I was right the first time. I don't claim to be perfect, I just claim to be persistent. Oh look, it's netstat. So now you see what is connected to what. You can identify internal IP schemes, domain controllers, this, that, and whatever was connected. Some of the software, so now we see they use FileZilla, so that would be a point that you could possibly look at exploitation, all that fun stuff. So if we want to do something like, say, Mimikatz, we've got to put this over here. Plugins equal, and you can set whatever directory you want for this. I just put them all here. Oh man, I deleted that. But anyway, I deleted the wrong thing, so Chrome and Firefox is not going to work today, it says. But anyway, there we have username administrator, and their password is admin@PSUT. Other things we could play with here, we'll do hash dump and IE history. This is going to be how I derived the NTLM hashes. We can look at IE history. And really, we're doing the same thing that forensics professionals are doing when they're analyzing an image to find out what went wrong. We're also doing it to find out what could go wrong. But here, this is what they were looking at. So they were cookie data here. We can dump all this stuff as well. Another thing to look at would be command scan, CMD scan. So with that one, this is everything that was passed in the command line. So we see here they were configuring a firewall to allow remote desktop. That's something to be cognizant of. And then here's what else I've got in terms of what I installed in terms of third-party plugins to use. Basically, auto runs Chrome and Firefox history, but I've got to reinstall the SQLite thing. I took that out. Mimikatz. You can look at scheduled tasks. This specific image doesn't have any, so there's nothing to look at there. And we'll do the this one here, the NDIS packet scan. This one's really cool, actually. So basically, this is showing you more or less PCAPs. It's going to take a second. But basically, you could see what connections existed, where the data was sent, what port they were on, all that. So like right here, here's some port 80. So that's some web traffic. And we see the source and the destination are both internal. So that tells you something is an internal web server and it's not encrypted. So from an attacker's perspective, it's a good place to probably work on some man-in-the-middle type stuff, try to sniff things out. But then here are 3 MAC addresses you could use. So if you're trying to get on the wireless, you could use these for MAC spoofing or whatever along those lines. So many different ways that you can actually go with that. So back to the presentation, because we're coming up on time here shortly. I want to make you aware of my mentorship platform through the Hackin Glass. Basically, we understand that academia does some things and that certs do other things. We're trying to be the stuff in the middle. So if you ever need 14 years of Ethereum experience, come to us. Purely kidding. But basically, it's to help you get experience with things that employers are looking for so that you don't have to have a CISSP to get your entry-level help desk job. Although, I mean, if you want to go take it, go for it. I mean, I've got it, and I'll tell you, it's easier to pass it if you don't have experience because there's the right way, the wrong way, and the CISSP way. The less experience you have, take it. But you can contact us on Facebook and Twitter. So there's that. There's my upcoming speaking engagement. It's at Hackfest. And then upcoming training opportunities. I'm doing a 4-hour OSINT training on November 5th. $10 off with coupon code 13 Wild West Hackin Fest 37. And then I'm also doing a 3-hour regular expression course the following week. It's going to be mostly based on PCRE and Python regular expressions, but once you learn the syntax, it's fairly easy to move it across. So we'll be playing with that. So I'll open it up. Any questions? Questions, concerns, complaints, grievances, thoughts, opinions, or otherwise? If there are no questions, then that's all, folks. Thanks.